WASD is a global leader and platform in sustainability for researchers, policymakers, practitioners, and academics to exchange ideas, share knowledge, and collaborate on solutions for sustainable development challenges.
Hello everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Today I will present my research on transforming Sudan. Since the outbreak of war in Sudan in 2023, much of the country's built environment has been damaged. So before discussing rebuilding or developing any recovery ideas, we first need to understand the scale of the loss. This short video shows examples of Sudan's built environment before and after the war. What we have just seen is a reminder that we have lost more than buildings. We have lost homes, heritage, lives, and the social fabric of the entire community. Today, more than 65% of urban infrastructure in Sudan in the conflict zones requires major rehabilitation. Also, around 14 million people have been displaced, and many of Sudan's historic sites and traditional neighborhoods have been damaged or threatened. So, before asking how we rebuild, we must first ask what we are really building. Is it homes or hope, infrastructure or identity? Is it public spaces or peace? These questions became the starting point for my research. If we don't clearly define what we are rebuilding, we risk repeating the same mistakes. This actually brings us to another important question. What went wrong before? Over the past years, Sudan has seen significant urban development, especially in Khartoum, the capital city of Sudan. However, many projects were disconnected from community needs, prioritized speed over long-term resilience, also relied on product solutions and overlooked local climate, culture, and planning. As a result, they often fail to respond to climate realities. This tower is a good example of a wider issue in Sudan. The project, located in Al-Mugran, Khartoum's central business district, it was built during the oil boom in Sudan at a cost of around $92 million and became a symbol of economic growth and modernity. However, its fully glazed facade, imported materials, and limited climate-responsive features made it poorly suited to local conditions. More broadly, the tower also reflects a development approach that often prioritized imported models over the local context. It was also built on a site with significant social and historical value, yet lacked the planning and design guidance needed to create places that truly serve the communities of Sudan. Today, the tower has been damaged by the war, as shown in the image on the right, raising an important question. Should we retrofit damaged modern icons like this or rebuild in a way that is better aligned with Sudan's climate, culture, and long-term resilience? So to answer these questions, I used a mixed research approach. I studied 7 building case studies. I conducted 7 expert interviews. I reviewed policies and examined recovery experiences from other post-conflict countries. I didn't just read it, I listened, I questioned, and I built a framework grounded in these realities. So drawing on these findings, I developed a recovery framework tailored to Sudan's context. The main outcome of this research is the Sustainable Rebuilding and Recovery Framework, or SRRF. The framework is aligned with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and Build Back Better principles. Also, it aims to support Sudan's recovery, meanwhile avoiding past mistakes. Also, the framework can be adapted to suit each country's context. It's built around 6 interconnected pillars: environmental and climate resilience, sustainable mobility, health and well-being, efficient resource utilization, social and economic recovery, and heritage preservation. This infographic illustrates the 6 pillars, their sub-themes, and their links to the Sustainable Development Goals. Together, these pillars provide a roadmap for a resilient, inclusive, and a sustainable recovery. Due to time limit, I will briefly highlight 2 pillars from the framework. Each pillar includes a set of sub-themes key strategies, Sudan-specific challenges, and links to the Sustainable Development Goals. The first pillar is efficient resource utilization. It mainly focuses on improving how materials, energy, water, and local resources are managed in a country facing energy shortages, rising costs, and environmental pressures. Also, this pillar is organized around 5 sub-themes: sustainable materials, energy efficiency and renewables, water management, waste reduction, and local green supply chains. Sudan relies heavily on imported construction materials, despite the large amount of reusable war debris. So the framework therefore promotes life cycle assessment, material reuse, and locally sourced climate responsive materials such as adobe and Nubian poles. Also, energy is another major challenge in Sudan. The temperatures can reach 47 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, power shortages and fuel scarcity force many communities to depend on diesel generators. So to address this, the framework promotes a fabric-first approach, passive design strategies drawn from traditional Sudanese architecture and the use of renewable energy systems. Also, water scarcity is also becoming worse due to climate pressures. The strategies like rainwater harvesting, greywater recycling, and condensate recovery can help improve water efficiency and resilience. Finally, stronger supply chains can reduce dependence on imports, lower emissions, create jobs, and support long-term recovery. Together, these strategies contribute to several SDGs like SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, and SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. Another pillar that is very important to me is heritage preservation. The war already has damaged important cultural landmarks, museums, and historic sites across Sudan, while looting has led to the loss of irreplaceable artifacts. Unfortunately, some items from the Sudan National Museum have reportedly been stolen and offered for sale online. These losses threaten not only Sudan's heritage, but also its cultural identity. That's why this pillar focuses on documenting vulnerable city sites, restoring damaged heritage, integrating heritage into urban planning, and involving communities in preservation efforts. In the short term, this includes emergency documenting using satellite imagery, digital mapping, and risk assessments. Also, collaboration with organizations such as Interpol to help recover stolen artifacts. The restoration also will require investment in local training and international partnerships, especially given the shortage of conservation specialists in Sudan. At the same time, planning policies must protect historic districts and ensure that new development reflects Sudan's architectural heritage rather than replacing it. And finally, heritage recovery is about people as much as places. So through education, cultural tourism, and community-led initiatives, we can reconnect communities with their history and strengthen a sense of belonging. This pillar aligns with several SDGs as well, like SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and SDG 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. We can also learn from UNESCO's Nubian Monument Rescue campaign in the 1960s, when the Aswan High Dam threatened Nubian temples. At that time, more than 50 countries came together and raised around $80 million to save them. This case demonstrated the power of global cultural solidarity. And today, Sudan needs the same commitment and urgency before no heritage is lost. And looking ahead, I imagine a Sudan with resilient cities, clean energy, thriving heritage, and stronger local communities. A Sudan where development works alongside cultural identity. I believe if the right decisions are made today, Sudan has the potential to become a role model for sustainable post-conflict in Africa. In the end, rebuilding Sudan is not only about replacing what has been lost, it's about rebuilding communities, identity, and opportunities. Thank you so much for listening.